The school board with Daryl Geffken, who's seeking a 6-year term for the position 3 seat on the Spokane Public Schools Board of Directors. Mr. Geffken's opponent, Melissa Bedford, who's a professor at Eastern Washington University, has declined to participate in our debate, but we wanted to give a chance for the public to hear from Daryl Geffken and why he is running and what he hopes to bring to the school board if he's elected. Now, we're hoping to talk for about 20 minutes or so on some important issues and to give listeners a better understanding of Daryl's candidacy and his position on several issues. With that, let me introduce Mr. Daryl Geffken, a former youth pastor, now a financial advisor who has 2 children in Spokane Public Schools, and he has lived in Spokane for more than 15 years. And take it away, Daryl. Tell us about yourself and why you are running for the school board.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts here. Daryl Geffken, running for Spokane School Board Position 3. I am the proud father of 2 SPS students. I am the proud husband of an SPS alumnus as well. And like Jim said, I've lived in Spokane for approximately 17 years, during which I've done a variety of different things. I've worked in the community. I've partnered with a variety of different community experts, from student development folks to family resources, all across the board. I've partnered with educators in my role as a student pastor, on a weekly basis to ensure the health and the growth of students. And then went to GU, worked in student development there, got my PhD in leadership and organizational theory, and have been working as a financial advisor for the last 7 years, and really just the opportunity to steward people along and with their resources, help them be fiscally responsible and achieve their goals. Do you want me to keep going in terms of what I want to do, or?
Go ahead.
All right. So, I mean, I've got a trifold goal here, and the first one really is advocating for students, families, teachers, and the community members who have lost their voice over the last couple of years. I want to stand up for those people. I want to bring that voice back to the board. I want to bring it back to education and curriculum. I certainly want to provide opportunity for all students to become the best version of themselves. And the last thing that I really want to emphasize is transparency of communication. Transparency of communication and honest and open conversation between the school board, the school district, the teachers union, and its true constituents, who are the who are the students, the parents, the teachers, and the taxpayers. So those are my goals. That's why I think I'm very highly equipped to do it.
Let me ask you, Daryl, what are some of those voices that you feel are not being heard sufficiently by the district?
Yeah, well, and it's a great question. I think primarily I look and I say students and parents. This is partly how I started to reluctantly raise my hand to take this on as an endeavor. And as you start to doorbell and you start to talk to different people in different communities, over 1,000 different doors that I've knocked on, people feel as though their voice has been belittled. They feel as though when they raise up concerns, right, they go through the chain of command, right, but ultimately the response is, hey, you know what? Let the experts do this. You don't. We appreciate that you're bringing these concerns up, but really, this is our role, right? And so parents feel disenfranchised. They feel as though, I've heard from the school district, that the parents just aren't hearing what they want to hear. But I can tell you, in my exchanges with the school district, it's not that I'm not getting an answer to what I, or that aligns with what I hope the answer will be. It's actually, you're not answering the question, or thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time. Why don't you go back and do what you do and leave this work to the experts? And I think that's problematic. I think that's largely problematic.
Obviously, the last year and a half has been very difficult for parents. We had remote learning. We had a very ragged retreat, I think, to that. We had a lot of issues. Maybe talk a little bit about what you think the district has done well and maybe not so well in the COVID era.
Yeah, I think what the district has done well largely is on the shoulders of the teachers. There are teachers who have been passionate about saying how can I try to keep my students engaged? How can I do that? I mean, partly when I was working remotely for the first bit before I went back to my office, I was leaning over the shoulders of my kids and listening to teachers who were trying their hardest to say, this is how we engage. This is what we do to give you some other creative ways to do that. And frankly, I think the teachers rolled with it A lot of teachers, the very cause-based teachers, they tried to find different ways to handle what became a very strange situation, something that they hadn't been trained for. And the other thing that they did well, I think, was take on a variety of different new ideas and just say, oh my gosh, I've got to put these things together. What they didn't do well is I think the district is highly reactionary. I think we were slow in getting students back face to face. I think that's critical. That is mission critical for me. And we're seeing that there are a variety of different issues that have come up out of that. I think even in terms of distribution of laptops, why did Rogers get its laptops last? As opposed to some others. I think there's a variety of different things that are very concerning for me in terms of how this was handled. I think that we could have brought students back faster. I think there could have been safety measures put into place that would have honored all people who are concerned. And I think ultimately we want to continue to make sure that we've got our students in face-to-face learning.
Now, some would argue that, and the district has maintained very staunchly that they're following the recommendations of the experts, public health officials, in taking a very cautious approach to returning kids to school in person. But you feel that was overcautious?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. I think the overcaution and what they were basing it on was, primarily, at least in the exchanges that I've had with the school district, it was, here's our initial data set. Here's our initial understanding of what it means to be truly safe and appropriate for the situation. And that was in the midst of just trying to get a lay of the land of the entire pandemic, right? So when you started to see school districts with more and more longitudinal data saying, hey, we're back, we're doing things well, right? We've got in-person learning, right? We've modified some of those things, but we're doing that well. And we started to pinpoint and bring those issues forward, right? That was then like, no, you know what? We're relying on old data. We're relying on old data. We're relying on old data. Well, guess what? That old data wasn't designed for the pandemic situation. And we now have new data, right? And we've seen this across the entire pandemic, hey, new thing. Oh, not that. This, and the problem is there's so much confusion because so much of this I feel has been politicized that there's so much confusion and so much lack of trust now because it feels like everything has been politicized. So, it just feels as though there's a lack of transparency in approaching those issues. So I don't know, Jim, does that answer the question?
No, that's a good answer. And now we're back to full-time learning. Obviously,
Yeah.
kids are wearing masks.
Yep.
And again, that's an issue with a governor's mandate. The districts really don't have a choice. If there were no mandate, what would you do if you could decide on masks for kids in Spokane public schools? If there was no mandate.
Again, my priority is going to make sure that we've got in-person learning, right? And that we don't do something that is going to jeopardize that, right? And so I can't speak for what other powers would overlay and say, hey, because of this or because of this many illnesses or whatever, this is how we're going to shut those things down. I do think, if we were in a world of no mandates, then I would say, what is the appropriate way to be respectful for all people who are concerned, right? And that's generally been how we did this before it was mandated. If we see someone wearing a mask, we're putting a mask on. If we're not, then we're maintaining distance, right? I'm a big proponent of allowing people to have, some wisdom on their own. So I do think that's important. That's not where we are in. That's not our environment right now, to the point of saying that Olympia has basically said, if we don't follow the mandate, then they're cutting all funding to public education. The right of public education is going to be unfunded, because of that. And that's a very strong arm mandate. That said, I'll wear a mask. That to me is not the issue. It's not the hill to die on at all. The point here is be respectful of people, but the bigger point is maintain in-person learning, right? So that's where I go on that. I've had the opportunity to listen to people and their concerns and look at some of the data that exists. And I understand that mandates are hard and that, we feel freedom is limited. I would love to see more local control on these issues. But there needs to be a priority for a larger benefit. And I'll tell you, if wearing a mask helps ensure that our students remain in school for full-time learning, then I'm wearing a mask.
All right, enough of COVID. Let's talk about some other issues.
Love it.
Another big issue is equity, and as you know, the board this summer passed an equity policy based on an equity resolution that was passed the year before.
Yep.
And the idea is excellence for all. I think that's, that's obviously the motto of the district. What's your take on the equity policy and also just equity in general, what that means to you?
Yeah, sure. Equity to me, first off, another, we've talked about this before, supercharged word, highly politicized word. And so, what the board has in front of it, it truly is one of the greater opportunities here is to define what all of these words mean in the equity resolution. For me, equity means providing an opportunity and the accountability for every person to become the best version of themselves, right? Equity can't, it's not a, it's a process, but it can't be a result. We need to make sure that we understand that people have different learning abilities, they have different learning styles, they have a variety of different things. And for me, for 25 years of my career, my passion has been, and my belief has been on this presupposition, on this underlying belief that every person has value, and it's my privilege, it's my joy, and it's my responsibility to find that value in each person, right? So that's collecting their story, putting aside my inner monologue for a minute, and saying I don't want to story top you. I don't want to be thinking about what I'm going to say next. I want to truly listen to what you say. And Jim, listening is got to be the biggest thing for me. Again, going out in the community. And I think the board has to listen to what the community needs. What are some of the concerns they have? All of the community. So that's what equity means to me. I think that the policy is belabored and it's not done. For all the wordsmithing and for all the word crafting and all the things that were sourced, it still is hollow in the sense that it really has not been defined. What do we mean by some of the words across both of those resolutions?
Now, some critics of the district have criticized the recently passed boundary revisions. These will affect thousands of children for years to come, and the board and the district decided to go in the direction of keeping neighborhoods together and avoiding any sort of major redrawing of boundaries. What we do end up with, however, is some schools that are going to be severely disadvantaged and some that are going to be much better off demographically. How does that strike you?
It strikes me. It's just everything about that entire process, and as it's ongoing, strikes me as trying to look good and say, hey, we've got this. We've done this, and now we're railing the process through. I mean, down to the fact that, was it last week or the week before, that the school board was listening to the analysis of the impact on students based on the boundaries they had already accepted, right? I mean, that's backwards. I'm sorry. As a systematic thinker, that is backwards. You consider what are the ramifications on your constituency before you appropriate something or before you approve it, right? So the fact that they were listening and saying, well, wow, what is going to be the impact on that? So there's so many people in the community who feel as though their voice was not heard, right? They didn't feel as though they had the correct avenue or forum. It was conducted during COVID, right? So there's a lot of confusion as to why people drew those boundaries the way they did. I do think that we have to look and say, I think the one thing that they did really, really well is they said, students learn best in pods, right? And so we're going to try to keep those together. And I think that's admirable. I don't know enough about the topic itself. Like, I don't know quite enough about the full demographics of Spokane at this point to say this is how I would suggest those lines should be drawn. But you certainly should look and say, let's make sure that each school has got the opportunities and the resources from its community members to make sure that we can have excellence in everyone.
It's a fact that Spokane spends considerably more on schools in low income areas. For example, about $4,000 per student more at Shaw Middle School in Northeast Spokane than it does at Sacagawea. And yet, if you look at the test scores, Sacagawea obviously much higher achievement. This is obviously a socioeconomic issue, but how do you try to balance that playing field? What can you do realistically?
Yeah, and that's $1 million question. And I think for me, it comes to community engagement, right? There have been a variety of different people that I've talked to in a variety of different neighborhoods, and just saying, so why is it, why is it that certain parents will not go into a school and listen to a teacher talking to them about their student, right? There's so many different reasons there, and there's so many, some of it just is embarrassment, some of it's shame, some of it's I can't make it on time, because I'm pulled. Those things need to be accounted for. I mean, there's this incredible guy, community mentor, Will Davis, and he has dedicated what is now his own business to making sure that he's got after school mentoring for gang related students who are struggling, and supporting them, and working with them, and then engaging their parents. And I think that, Jim, I think that's the first thing, is saying, how do we engage parents in a way that's appropriate? It could be off site, it could be, whatever. We don't put that on the teachers. The teachers don't need to, their teachers are stretched thin enough. They don't need to go door knocking, but I do think that there needs to be ways that we actually increase, teacher or parent engagement. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why you see SAC do it as well as it does, is that largely it's got parents who are able to be engaged, right? And that's why you see some of the carnivals at places like Hutton that do so well, because they've got parents who are behind that, and that's not a knock on any parent who's not doing that. That's simply saying that parent engagement piece is very, very, very powerful.
Now, the whole issue of equity and the resolution itself and the equity policy has led us on into the next segue, which is critical race theory. And some people believe that an equity policy is somehow related to critical race theory. All districts in this area have strongly denied that they teach it. Do you see any connection between equity policies and critical race theory? Is it letting that into the classroom a little bit?
Yeah. So I mean, here's another area where it's A, politicized, and B, very, very confusing for people to navigate, right? And all candidates, all four of the candidates agree that CRT is an upper level course, right? That you might find in law school. It's not being taught in the district in that regard, right? However, I think that answer, to me, when I hear that, that's just dismissive again. That's reason like, oh, come on, it's a law school class, right? It's like, can we go and actually take a look at the deeper issue and the deeper concerns in our community? It's not hard for community members to believe that the tenets of critical race theory inform the policies and the priorities of the district. It's not, right? Good example here is that the drafts of those equity policies, they sourced articles that were based in CRT, right? So to their credit, when it was highlighted, right, those sources were then removed, but the language still largely remained. So again, that's creating confusion, right? So again, I'm going to go back to what I said. The board has an opportunity to define these words to help people say, at least we can identify what we mean when we say equity. This is what we mean when we say critical race theory. Are they the same? Are they not? Where do those things go? But all of it leads to confusion, right? I mean, recent events that have spotlighted Panorama as a company that utilizes critical race theory as a framework for schools. Spokane School District does contract with Panorama. They conduct surveys for 3rd through 12th graders and for teachers and staff. And that relationship adds confusion. Now I'm having good conversation, or at least a back and forth in email with who's it, Scott Kerwine, who's the liaison for Panorama, right? And so we're just going back in terms of the language, but it's there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of anger, there's a lack of trust on this particular issue. So in my mind, Jim, there needs to be an open and honest conversation between the board, the school district, and its constituents, rather than arguments. And that's what it goes to far too often, right? So we need an accurate teaching of U.S. history. We need that, absolutely.
Speaking of which, going way back to my own high school days, I really loved the classes where we talked openly and honestly about politics and about current events and history, and no one felt inhibited by that discussion. And certainly the teachers felt like they could bring things up, they could play devil's advocate, and they could get you to think critically. Doesn't this discussion maybe have a chilling effect on how free teachers feel to discuss this?
Absolutely. And I've talked to teachers. I actually just got up from being on the porch with a teacher who came over to grab one of my signs, and that's about as much as I can go on the detail there. But it's limiting people to have a conversation, right? Again, this goes back to that whole idea of voices have been diminished. right? Because people are nervous to say anything. You know, if you say one thing, it's so amazingly fast how quickly you can then all of a sudden be labeled this far down the road on that, you know? I mean, am I going to say this? Yeah, I am. I've had emails. One email I had from a lady was like, "Do you even know a person of color? Have you ever even interacted with a person of color?" And I'm like, you know what? I've got friends who are of all different types of persuasions. I work with community members who are of a variety of different backgrounds and socioeconomic status. For the last 25 years, my doctoral dissertation is on highlighting disparity in the United States and what we can do to overcome that. How do we help people actually engage in that process? So, you know, it's scary how quickly we go to judge people, and that has people nervous, Jim, to say. I really do think it has people nervous to say where they stand or what they believe, you know, because we just, you know, my biggest fear out of all of this campaigning is that some of my friends will get flack for something that I say.
Right. Just a couple more questions, actually.
Sure.
And you're in the financial business, so this is right up your alley. This district has about a $570 million budget this year.
Yeah.
Most of that money is for salaries and benefits to teachers. But there's a lot of other things that it spends its
Yeah.
money on. We have some new buildings. We have lots of new programs. Have you taken a look at where that money goes? And maybe you could offer some suggestions for maybe it's being overspent or underspent.
Yeah. I mean, it's the second largest payroll in the county, is Spokane Schools. So it's not a small thing at all. It does need some wisdom in terms of figuring out what are income sources and where do those resources go and what's the best. For me, I look at it and say, what's the biggest return on investment for me? So you look and you say, average amount, you know, it's $225 that would be allotted to a student, class size of 25. So a little under $17,000 per student. And I look at that and I say, wow, that's a lot. Where does that all go? There are a variety of different resource managers. There's a variety of different implement pieces there. And I think, Jim, that my biggest critique here is it seems as though the school district feels as though the schools and the teachers have to be all things for all people at this point, right? So that's concerning to me. I think there are better ways that we can utilize community experts, people who are very, very well established in terms of family resources, all sorts of things. There's so many different ways that we can partner and not then have school budget be redirected from the classroom itself and on teaching the foundational skills that we need our students to have so that they succeed, right? And that would free up a good deal of money. I mean, I look and I'm like, why in the world do our teachers, right? And first off, let me just say this: we need to pay well for our teachers. You know, we want to be attractive to the best talent. But on the same side, we've got this over here, and yet you've got teachers doing GoFundMe accounts so that they can get materials into their classroom. And if that doesn't smack of fiscal irresponsibility, I don't know what does.
Anything that's overemphasized right now from a fiscal standpoint?
Well, I mean, Frank, yeah, I think right now I would look and I would say, well, all right. Good example is the school safety piece, right? And in 2019, we paid $1 million plus $1 million plus for an audit that came back, and it was an independent audit, came back and said, you know, here are the suggestions that we've got for you to, you know, as a school district. Here are the things you're doing well. Here's some ways that you can improve. You know, and that was just jettisoned. That was the school board basically said, thanks a ton, appreciate it. We've got a better idea. You know, and I mean, there's a great one right there. That's a wonderful
point. And speaking of which, and this is my last question, your opponent is flat out saying, no way would she want to see armed resource officers. I think you've said it's a little more complicated than that, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of clarify your position on armed resource officers.
Yeah, it is way more, you know, when you talk to a resource officer and they're saying, okay, I know that I have to go deal with someone outside of the school, and I know that I don't even have a flak jacket anymore, right? And I know that I'm supposed to call 911 as opposed to have a radio. they'll get a faster response. I mean, that's nerve-wracking. I look and I've sat in those in the rooms of our resources, where the safety specialists, our safety specialists, right? And I've gone through pictures of rooms that have been completely destroyed, right, by a student who is not acting up, a student who is completely
Right.
gone off the handle, right? I've seen pictures of weapons that have been confiscated in elementary schools, right? So I look at that and I say, we need to make sure that our safety specialists are trained and supported, and frankly, they're hired in a way that has got a strong methodology behind it. It's got a strong process behind it. So we know that we're hiring people who are just good quality people, continuing to train them so that they can triage, or they can de-escalate some of those situations, right? And then be appropriate in terms of how do we move forward in discipline. So there's so much more than that. I mean, I've sat in Sacagawea during a bomb scare. I've sat in other schools during lockdowns, right? We need to make sure that all of our students feel safe, all of them.
The last question is the easiest. Tell us why people should vote for you instead of your opponent.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm a fixture here. I've been here for almost 2 decades. I have no intent of leaving. I am a part of the community. I have volunteered and worked with and in support of so many different community groups, as well as public educators, for the entire time that I've been here and prior to, right? I've got a variety of different perspectives that I bring. I am a parent, right? I see what is going on in the school. I am well connected with a variety. Well, I already said that. I understand student development. I understand pedagogy. I have been an educator, and I am a steward of people's finances. I help people on the path towards financial health, right? And whether that's individuals or whether that's institutions, I've got a very, very solid grasp on that. So I've got a variety of different backgrounds. I have, and I think of all of those things, they create a pretty powerful and wise lens that allows me to be able to do the variety of different things. And above all, Jim, I listen, which is always ironic on these things, right? Because it's me talking.
Right.
But I listen. My goal in my professional life, in my personal life, in my volunteer life is to listen to other people, right? And so it's not voting for me to vote for me. It's voting for me to be a reflection of and stand for and advocate for people and their voices, to listen and truly understand what is going on in the community, right? That's not something you gain in 2 years of being in Spokane, and it's not something you gain from not having kids, and it's not something you gain from whatever. At the end of the day, this is not political to me. I'm not doing this for politics. I am doing this because I need to see students become the best version of themselves.
Thank you very much, Daryl. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, James.
We are done here. I think that went very well, guys. We will talk to you again soon.
Bye.